before we start stripping down the components, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the circuit board a good blowout with the leaf blower. I've taken off the cover, which is just simply 2 screws that was holding it in place. Important to remember, ice is considered food, so if I look inside here, there is quite a bit of ice inside there, and it's going to be too much time to remove the ice. So what you can do is just get a normal plastic bag. Let me just tilt this, and I'm just going to cover the bin just to ensure that we don't get any dust or debris going into the actual ice to spoil the product. When using a high volume leaf blower, you just want to cover it just to prevent unnecessary movement of cables, because this thing is pretty strong. It can loosen components like relays or your plugs. So to start with, I'm just going to give it a bit of a blow. Not much dust, and that's all you can really do with the PC board. What I will do is I'll just, before I close that, I will just make sure that all the cables are out of the way. As I mentioned, this was highly modified, so we've got a lot of loose cables and wires. What you can do is you can just find the source. Actually, this one is just disconnected completely, and just get rid of anything that's unnecessary or redundant. What we're going to do now is we're going to start stripping the components. First things first, I'm going to start with the top section. I'm going to take off the ice sensor. To do this, you follow your leads. What I also recommend is taking photographs of your connections, what you're going to disconnect. This way you don't get confused later. Depending on your model, sometimes this has a clip or a plug, and simply just remove the cable. There's your ice sensor off. So if you have a look inside here, we've got a lot of gunk and slime, and there's going to be a mixture of mold and algae. And also we want to clean these probes just to make sure we get good contact. Put this aside. To take off the cascade, first things first is just loosen this little screw here, and this clips off just like that, and you can take off your pipe. Remember to put all your components on one side. We will be cleaning this with the descaler just to make sure that everything is looking healthy again. So if we look at our cascade, I'm going to loosen that screw. That way this slides out. Just watch out your rubbers. The reason why we want to clean this, let me try and focus in on here, is because you've got slime and you want to get rid of this. So this is a mixture of dirt, grime, algae, and possibly mold. This we can set aside to clean, and we're going to continue stripping the lower section of the ice machine. As I mentioned, ice is considered a food item, so just make sure that you have a plastic sheet to protect the ice. Because I need to work out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that there's no dirt on my bag, and I'm just going to place it inside just to collect any screws or dirt so it doesn't contaminate the ice. So as mentioned before working on an ice machine, isolate your water. Remember, this has got a float sensor, so my water's off. What I need to do is I need to drain this water. Just grab a bucket, and over here you have your drain, and just release your ice. Try not to get too much water on the ice because it can compromise the quality. Let this drain out, and we can start stripping up the motor and the sump. To start off with, I'm going to disconnect and remove the actual water pump. you'll see there's a plug. Depending on your model, the position may be different, but ideally there's going to be an electrical plug, and you will have 2 screws, or like I said, depending on your model. This one is 2 screws at the bottom and a plug, which I'm going to remove. So I'm going to start stripping it. I can't get access to these plugs just yet, so just bear with me because these screws are pretty badly rusted. That screw fell inside there, and that's why it's important to keep the sump until we are done with repairing or servicing. That way I don't have to dig through tons of ice to look for a random screw. Okay, now I can access my plugs. Okay, so this one has been modified again, so we will have to do that's it. A lot of modifications on this machine. This is just a clamp. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. And I want to just take this out completely because we want to clean out all this gunk. If you look inside there, there is a lot of slime inside this poor pump. Now that our pump is out, I want to get these hose connections out because again they are pretty slimy. So this one is held by clamps, and I'm just going to pop it off like that. Very important, try and hold this side because the pipe is going to the back into the valve. You don't want to damage it or loosen it unnecessarily. That's your pipe removed. I'm probably going to take this off just to see. We can take this off. Actually, I'm going to leave this on because it is pretty badly rusted. So let's rather leave this, not tamper too much with it. There is a lot of scale on here, but what we're going to do is we're going to use the descaler and clean this out. So to clean this section, what we want to do is I'm just going to apply some descaler to this mechanism here, clean that pipe a little bit, and clean some of the, well, actually clean this whole evaporator up with descaler. What I use is a kettle and steam iron cleaner. Reason being, if it's a kettle, it's going to be relatively food friendly. I do not recommend using any high industrial strength cleaners because we might contaminate the ice and it could affect somebody with allergies. So what I'm going to pretty much do is I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to apply the descaler, and as it falls it'll collect into the sump. So before I continue, I'm just going to close this off. This one hasn't got a leak, but I've got a broad-based bucket at the bottom, so any fluid will be collected in my bucket. If you can, it is recommended to remove the ice, but it depends on the clients if there's availability. But just work carefully and make sure you don't get any debris at the bottom. So this part, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sachet of descaler, pour it into a jug. I don't want to dilute it too much, and I don't want too much high concentration. And then just a standard glass or cup of warm water. We'll try with half for now, and just see the formula. Stir it up, try and dissolve as much as possible. And what you're going to do is you're going to carefully apply it. You'll see that fizzing, that's descaler going to work. I'm not interested in cleaning this just yet. I want to clean these components first, and then we're going to remove the sump. To clean the evaporator, I'm just going to apply some descaler. You can see it's fizzing and it's already doing its job. You can have a look here. These are the sections I have applied it, and it's already starting to loosen out. And there is our copper exposed, so we're removing a lot of patination, which is good. So that way we can make sure that we know that our evaporator is going to be really clean. Don't scratch it with anything. Do not use a scraper, because you can burr it, and it'll just make the ice harder to slip out during the defrost. But if you can see, there's the difference between that side I've done and this side hasn't been done yet. So we have some sections with really stubborn dirt. What you can use is a scraper. Again, do not scrape the actual evaporator, and just try and remove as much residual dirt as possible, or dirt and light scale and junk. What I need is just a cloth, and we can really see a major difference. The reason why we want to get as much scale off is because it can eventually work itself loose and fall into the bin and contaminate our ice. Last thing a client wants is having his drink with flakes of limescale and grime in his ice cube. I'm going to continue just scraping off as much as I can. If you really have to, for instance here, you can loosen these screws just to get at the back of this clip, just to get rid of all these stubborn stains. So I've decided I'm going to strip this down because I can't get these stains out. It's not so much the stains I'm worried about, I'm more worried about this loose debris and junk. So if we look at that, we can get this relatively clean and presentable for the client. Not only that, but we don't want this to fall into our product. Now that we've cleaned the top section, I'm going to jump onto this. This is really stubborn. As long as it's not loose, for instance, items like this, it's just going to fall at some point and get caught up into our food product. But I want to just get the chassis as clean as possible. You see that items like this will cause problems. Just remember, it's never going to be 100% clean. Just take my scouring pad and just clean as much as possible to be a little bit more presentable to the client. Don't use anything too abrasive because you don't want to scratch the finish, which is just going to attract more limescale to build up. The reason you want to clean it this much is because it's good workmanship and it's great presentation for your client. That's a problem. Don't know if you heard it, there was a bit of a leak there. These are pretty useless. I'm going to replace these with proper Schrader valve caps. The reason being because if you have a look at this, as I tightened it, it pushes the Schrader valve inside. So I'm going to get rid of these. You're not going to get an ice machine that's going to be 100% clean, depending on the times they are serviced per year. But this one's starting to look a lot more presentable. Just to collect any solvent first, and then we will be rinsing the cloth with clean water just to get the descaler out of these, which I'll show you later on in the video. So looking pretty good here. always good to go and do a good job, because it's down to client relations. It's a form of marketing. Do a good job and you will always be busy with work. Just to show you, that's why we placed the bucket and the plastic bag. Although I was careful, you're still going to get junk going into your eyes. So this is entirely up to you, and depending on the productivity of the client, is to either empty the ice bin or just work really carefully if there's no time to empty the ice bin during the service. Now that everything is clean, the evaporator has been descaled. Remember, like I said, is I'm not going to rinse it now. I'm going to use the actual pump to rinse out any scale. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove the sump. Always be careful with these because they are very brittle because of the age. Again, keep your ice covered. Although everything seems dirty, my hands seem dirty, we're just doing the hardcore clean right now. But later on in the video we will disinfect this, purely because it's, like I said before, ice is a food product. So to remove this, depending on the model, here, this one I've noticed there's a screw there, and a screw here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one off first. This way I don't put a lot of pressure on the actual sump, because over time they can become brittle. I'm going to start with this side because this side is lighter. Again, I don't put a lot of pressure on the actual sump. You'll see that most of these sumps are cracked usually here, because someone will take this side off first, and with the weight it will very likely crack. Again, just make sure you do not drop any residue into the product. That's the sump removed. What you can do is you always find black behind the sump. This is mold and dirt, and I'm going to do the same cleaning process. I'm going to use my bucket a little bit higher as I apply the descaler and clean as I go along. This is going to be very difficult to do with one hand, but I'm just going to show you. So I'll hold my bucket, have a look at that fizzing. It's already starting to do its job, and you'll notice that the mold is starting to be dissolved. Leave this for a few minutes, and then what I'm going to do is I'll do it off camera. I'm going to do the same. I'll use the scraper to get off the most of the scale, and especially the mold. I do not want mold in my ice machines. Okay, so I've removed as much of the scale as possible. I won't be able to get all of that off. It's just built up over the years, but most importantly I don't have any flakes coming off, and the most crucial part is I've removed all the black mold from the backside of the sump. As I said, just remember to always clean underneath, because you will have slime build-up and possible mold. But if we look compared to what we were dealing with, it's starting to look a lot better. Just do a good job, because your work is your signature, and clients will pay top dollar for top quality work.